Welcome, and I'm sharing my favorite scenes from my books. This is from Merosis Book 1, and the chapter is called Webs of Fate. Zephyr became silent after divulging that little bit about he and Demond. Now they rode in silence as the sun shone brightly. Birds chirped and insects whirled past. The only exciting thing to happen was when they rode through a huge spiderweb, causing Brittany to curse and Zephyr to laugh as she pulled it out of her hair. Brittany marveled at how efficiently Zephyr picked his way through this confusing mess of a forest. She could no longer see any evidence of a trail. They seemed to be simply progressing through the forest at random with nothing to guide them. He didn't seem to be bothered by the lack of trail, but continued to guide the horse through the trees and bushes knowingly. She could understand why he had fallen silent. If people blame me for their problems, I wouldn't like talking about it either. There was a noise in the trees above them, causing Brittany to look up. She wondered if they had startled another animal. She had to wonder how often the animals here had encountered humans. Judging by the state of things, it had been a very long time since anything had passed this way. Her little biological pep talk had caused a number of questions to rise within her mind. She was still on the offensive, attempting to hide that she knew so little about the world, even though Zephyr clearly knew she was not from here. The horse stumbled. Whoa! Zephyr reached past Brittany to grab the horse's mane. Steady there. But the horse was tripping forward, and before Brittany knew what was happening, she was catapulted over its head. She fell painfully on her hands and knees. She could smell the tang of her own blood oozing from the scrapes on her elbows. She scrambled out of the way of the horse lest it bolt and turned to see if Zephyr was okay. A taut rope stretched between two trees caught the horse's legs, and it now struggled to free itself. Zephyr clung to its back, attempting to soothe it while not being unseated as the mare bucked and tugged on the rope. The mare's eyes were rolling in its head. Its ears lay flat as it bared its teeth in frustration. There was a snapping sound somewhere off to the right, and the rope suddenly loosened. The mare bolted forward as the rope came away. Brittany watched as it flew past her, with Zephyr futilely attempting to stop the frightened animal. He was so busy trying to stay on that he didn't even spare a glance towards her. Standing up, she started dusting off her dress as she worried about Zephyr. She didn't sense or hear the presence behind her until it was too late. Something solid, a piece of wood most likely, struck her in the back of the head. She didn't even have time to yell as the world went black with an explosive thud. When she woke, Brittany discovered that she was in something. She couldn't open her eyes. They were glued shut by whatever the substance was that had adhered to her entire body. She tried to wiggle, but her stomach was securely trapped in the wet, gooey substance that held her lips tightly shut. Breathing deeply to keep from panicking, she remembered what Zephyr had said about using meditation techniques to control her senses. Anything was better than freaking out within this stuff that seemed to get stronger the more she moved. She had taken a class on meditation during the summer. Her mind rolled back to the memories from that time, and she began to calm. Breathing in through her nose, she measured sequences. She finally made her heart stop racing, and her mind began to clear. She wondered briefly about the fact that the gooey stuff she was trapped in was not traveling up her nose, but dismissed the futile thought. She needed to know what was going on outside, to know what she was in before she could even begin to think about getting out. Thinking about where she was would only continue to increase her claustrophobia. In her mind's eye, the world around her was pulsating with a strange rhythm. She could almost see her with her other senses, so finely tuned, even with her eyes shut. The mess she was in, for it consisted of thousands of tiny slimy strings, thrummed with a heavy, steady beat, in tandem with drums outside. Chanting weaved in and out of the beat that lifted into a crescendo every now and then before descending into silence. The drums ceased abruptly just as Brittany's senses lurched, and she was looking at the world beyond her sticky prison as though she were out of body. The shock of what she saw caused her vision to waver, but with a great deal of mental strength she pushed to remain in the outer perspective. She was still aware of her body in the cocoon, but it felt distant and less immediate. The forest was covered in darkness, but there was just enough starlight bathing the scene in gray that she could see. Brittany was suspended in a white cocoon that hung 2,000 feet in the air from an iron-gray tree. The cocoon looked very much like what a spider might build for her eggs. There were other cocoons hanging from the trees nearby, and she could sense the life forms within them wavering like candle flames being drowned in wax. Floating, Brittany spun much like she had in the pool by using a quick movement of her arms. With a certainty she couldn't explain, she knew that a cocoon further down in the same tree held Zephyr. And apparently she had not been the only one caught. As she zoomed in closer on the cocoon encasing her body, a sudden piercing cry distracted her. "Bring forward the High Priestess!" Her perspective moved without her conscious acknowledgement, and she was hovering over a scene happening on the forest floor below her cocoon. 50 or so hellish-looking winged creatures were in a clearing, at the center of which was a pile of human skulls built in a pyramid shape. On top of that pile of skulls was a series of human thigh, arm, and hip bones fused together in a haphazard manner, creating a throne. Brittany's stomach turned as she looked at the creature encircling the throne. They were naked women of every skin tone and age, but horribly warped. Bony wings with fibrous membranes hung weakly from the women's backs. Their faces were sunken and their noses squashed flat, while long fangs hung from their lips. Most of them were covered in filth from head to toe, including mud and blood. They had long hair that reached down to their ankles and covered much of their nakedness, but their hair were tangled in clumps of dirt. There was a strange sort of dark red cloud that tinged the image of the women as they fell to their knees before their queen. The woman on the throne was the most frightening of all. She wore a strange crown made of human finger bones on the top of her long red hair. A blue, bloodshot human eye hung suspended at the center of the crown, and moved about in its socket with a life of its own. The crown had a black aura that was malignant and strangely more real to Brittany than anything else in this surreal perspective of the world. Several of the creatures came forward, carrying a wicker cage above them, howling and hooting as they did. The woman in the cage was being tossed from one side to the other, but her back remained straight. The other creatures joined in with cries of their own until the cage was put down. The queen smiled from her perch on the hill of skulls and then stood. She moved eloquently for all the dirt and filth that covered her body. Her long red hair draped over her shoulders cascaded down to where it trailed along the floor as she descended from her throne. She gently went to the wicker prison and opened the door, calling, "Come, High Priestess, won't you join us?" The woman who emerged from the wicker cage was beautiful. Her long silver hair fell to just above her hips. Her flawless, creamy white skin seemed to reflect the glow of the torches. Her robe was an immaculate white with blue lining the sleeves and the bottom. Her perfect rosebud mouth was set in a very firm straight line. There was an aura of soft blue around the woman that seemed strangely constricted by a filament of red. Her violet eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. "What do you want from me, Queen of the City?" Brittany felt a thrill of fear course through her veins at the words. The evil creature smiled. "I want you to watch as all for the hope for the salvation of the world is lost and your order falls. The silver spire is doomed." "The hope for salvation can never be lost," the high priestess sniffed. The city queen struck quickly. Her fingers were like claws with long red wicked nails that lashed onto the priestess's head, turning her about. "Look there," the queen of city pointed up to the branch where Brittany's cocoon hung. "We have caught your lost one, and there," she twisted the priestess's head, tangling up to the right, "the Lord of Darkness comes." Brittany turned to see a distant speck several miles away, which looked strangely human to the shape of a stingray, flying towards the forest. The plane was enormous, and its approach was completely silent. There was absolutely no engine noise, and it seemed to drift upon the wind. As she focused on the plane, she sensed a presence in it become aware of her. "Brittany, is that your name?" Fear coursed through her veins as she recognized Caldorian's voice within her mind. She snapped back painfully into her body. She was suddenly trapped within the sticky confines of the cocoon again. She had to get out. So that is my favorite chapter from the book, Merosis Book 1. I hope you enjoyed that little snippet, and take care and bye for now.